This computer. Okay, awesome. Go ahead.
Great, thanks. Well, thanks. Thanks for having me. Thanks for organizing and arranging. I've been looking forward to this for, I don't know, a couple of weeks now, I think.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can have an interesting and inspiring conversation tonight. I'm happy for it to be just very free flowing. I'm also happy to ramble, as I'm sure you'll find out, but feel free, anybody, to sort of jump in and, have questions. I'm happy to answer. So a bit about me. I think that's as good a place to start as any. So I come to Impact Zero. I joined as a board director about a year and a bit ago. And so I've been involved in the organization in that capacity for a bit over a year. I was really inspired by the vision of what Aaron and the rest of the team had built, and wanted to get involved in this exciting circular economy space. And now, a year and a bit later, I find myself in the board chair role, which is totally an honor and a delight, and means that I get to really just try to do my best to make everybody else to support everybody else in the awesome work that they're doing. So that's sort of my Impact Zero space. I wear another hat in my day job as a corporate and business lawyer for startups and small and medium-sized businesses working on impact, sustainability, having some sort of purpose in what they're doing, which is just like, I kind of can't believe that is, even as I say that, is something I couldn't have imagined a couple of years ago. But it's been a great fit for me and a great find. So I've been in that role with the firm that I practice in association with for basically since the beginning of this year, so about 6 months. And I also am now moving into the coaching space. So I'm wearing that hat as well, offering some coaching services to folks working in and around sustainability, trying to get into the space or trying to level up where they are, accelerate their career, and also hoping to offer services to organizations that are dealing with change management and trying to integrate sustainability. But that's all. I'm already off to Rambletown. So that's sort of like a little gloss of where I'm at now. I had this background in sustainability before I came to law, and I've had a very meandering career, and I've managed to finally to start tying it together in a really interesting and really fun way, which is awesome. So I want to try to help other people do the same.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think that background is really helpful, like context, because, going from sustainability and then looking into law, but then also trying to like meander your way through, I think is really important. And before, when we were first talking, you had said something that like really like sparked my like some similarity in me, that I was like, I totally can relate to this. And it was something along the lines of, I'm part of the group of environmentalists that are trying to like make a living, essentially, because I know a lot of the people in the space end up working for nonprofits, and I mean, as we're seeing, like it's like life is just so hard, and it's really hard to keep up with the times, and especially when you're in sustainability, it's almost like your services are so important, and the things that you bring to the table are so important, and they are really undervalued sometimes. And so it's like, how do you still make a living wage, have decent and desirable work, and how can those two be brought together? And so, I don't know if you have any like thoughts on that, but that was just something that really spoke to me when you said that.
Well, I mean, that's really speaking to me. That was so articulately put. I'm glad there's a recording of this.
Oh, thank you.
I think you've articulated this challenge that so many people are struggling and wrestling with, and I mean, like times are tough, right? Like we live in kind of almost unfathomable times. There's no roadmap for where we are. It's hard, even when you spend your days immersed in this. It's still hard to wrap your head around it. There's still layers and layers of abstraction, and I've never really landed at a place where I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I'm comfortable in relation to all of this. I know my place and I've got it figured out, and it's fine. It's been this continual search and iterative struggle and journey to sort of be like, what is the work?
Yeah.
And what is my relation to it? And what is my relation to the world in these times?
Yeah.
I started out in my sort of early 20s in the activist space and in the nonprofit space, and doing organizing work. I was working for Greenpeace in particular, and doing a lot of really great, interesting work. I learned a lot. I met amazing people. I got to work with really, really awesome folks who definitely had a big impact on my life, my career trajectory, my identity, and everything. And at that time, I was I don't know. It was just very easy to burn out in that context, and I didn't even have the language for it back then. And that's one thing that I find a little bit hopeful, is that it seems that we are gaining language to talk about these things more. But at that time, I think I really felt, I'm trying to sort of cast my mind back a little bit, but I think I really carried, as is easy to do, I carried the world on my shoulders a bit, and it felt, it was easy to be consumed by the work that I wanted to do, by the importance of the work that we're all trying to lean into, and just by the weight of it, the emotions of reckoning with this time in human history, and not having space for those conversations. I think, again, that's very, really helpful that we have so much more space for these conversations now, to be like, actually, it's entirely reasonable and set that, it makes sense that we would feel sad, angry, frustrated, overwhelmed, have all of these, like, how could we not have emotional responses to what's going on in the world? It's really weird to think otherwise, but so now I sort of find myself sitting in this place, and still it's not comfortable, where I'm like, cool, I now have alignment. I'm still not where I want to be financially by any means. But I have the privilege of being able to say, I get, my job, the way that I am making money, it's lined up, and I get to do these amazing volunteer things. I get to work with people that I love working with, on projects that I love working with. That's an incredible privilege. And it still, doesn't feel like enough, but I've also come to try to sit with this thing that, being okay with ourselves is part of the work as well, that we have to find wellness in the work that we're doing, and we have to try to offer that to one another, and we have to enjoy our lives. And that one is hard sometimes, right?
Oh my gosh. I think, to that point, like, I think it's so easy to get caught up in climate and the climate that we're in, especially if you care and if you also work in the space. And now I'd be interested in seeing, maybe a show of hands of like, who does work in sustainability, or like who's interested in sustainability and also is maybe involved in just, I don't know, just because I haven't met most of the people here, but maybe, raise your hand or make a reaction if you're in the space. And if you can also relate to these things, because I think also too, we think about this in a way that, like, we can't just leave work and then it's not on our minds anymore. It's like we are constantly thinking about this, either whether it's like in the news or day to day, and especially something to do with the circular economy. And I mean, my roles in the past have not been like, my paid roles have not been in the circular economy. But that being said, everything has to do with the circular economy. Like, no matter where you are, what you're doing, manufacturing, whether that's power, energy, clothing, anything, just your day to day is like so related to the circular economy. And that's why I think this is such a beautiful space, because everyone can relate to this. Everyone can relate to this. And, even if you don't work in sustainability, I think there's something to be said about, like, you do have to enjoy life at some point, but you also like there's also this like thing in the back of your head that's saying, no, be the yes man, be the person that's always saying yes to things. Like you should always be doing more. And like you said, like being okay with just being like saying, you know what, I've done enough today. I don't need to burn myself out, because then it's like you're not bringing your best self to the table every day, whether that's to work or your relationships or like with the people that you are volunteering with. Because that's something I've also noticed, is that like I've definitely fallen off on the Impact Zero grid, and like I feel really bad about that. And there's a lot of times where I'm like, I have a lot of guilt for that, because I'm like, maybe I'm just being burnt out with, you know, my day job, and then I don't feel like I have enough to give, even though it's like these are things that I love doing. They bring me so much peace and joy. And so I don't know, do you have any like maybe insight as to like how you would balance those? Like what are things that have like worked for you in the past where you're like, oh, that was really helpful, I should do that more often?
Oh, good question. Good question. I want to just say, I just want to invite anybody, you know, who's on the call. If you like, feel free to drop stuff in the chat as well.
Yeah, totally.
And in particular, I'm wondering like if anybody has a question or something that, you know, everybody, you know, it's Wednesday, you know, 6:45. Everybody decided to come on this call for some reason, and so I would love to know, you know, and you can tell me, or just drop it in the chat, might be easy. You know, if what can I give you, right? What can we offer you tonight? If there's something in particular that you were hoping to get, I'd love to know, so that I have a better chance to try to give it to you, but zero pressure either. So I just wanted to say that quickly, but let me try to answer your very good question again. So let me restate it to make sure that I've got it. I'm just gonna ask you to repeat it. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, of course. Oh my gosh, no, don't worry. Sometimes I like ramble
I
on.
thought I had it, and I clearly didn't.
I feel like it's such a good question. I don't remember it though. You remembered it. Was
just
good.
Completely blew my mind into blankness.
No, that's okay. Basically, like it's like how would you best describe ways that you felt in the past have been really helpful in letting you save time and energy for the things that you like doing, even though sometimes they may feel like work. Like for example, like for me, volunteering, some days it does feel like work, even though these are things that like I really enjoy doing, and I know it's making such an impact and like it's bringing me a lot of joy and value. But there are some days where I'm like, I can't make this LinkedIn post right now because mentally my brain cannot do words.
Right. Yeah. So I want to observe first, I think there's this interesting tension for those of us who care about this stuff and are engaged in it, whether or not, you know, you happen to be in a volunteer position, or whether you happen to be, you know, that you have got a paid position that you've got on the go, or maybe you're just, as I have been at many points in my life, somebody who's deeply passionate and just reading the news and coming to events and feeling like, this is so important and I don't know what to do. And I don't have an avenue right now. But so for all of us who are sort of captured in that bucket, I think there's this tension where when you think about these, you know, these issues that we're facing, climate change and energy scarcity and food security and everything else, all of these sort of overlapping crises and opportunities, to feel like it's so important, I have to do more, and there's always more to be done. And so that's sort of half of the tension. And then the other half is, I'm just one person, and nothing I do is ever going to be enough. And we have to somehow sit and find peace and find comfort in the middle of that tension. And I don't think it's ever resolved. Like I was saying a few minutes ago, I've never been comfortable. I've probably never been more comfortable than I am now, but in my sort of relation to this, but for me, it's kind of like it's a meditative thing. Honestly, it's, I've like literally, I've gotten into meditation and it's been enormously helpful over the last 2 years. And I think because, and, you know, without going way off and making this like a, you know, Aladdin's telling everybody they have to start meditating. But for me, one of the things it gives me is it situates me in the present, right here, right now. I'm sitting at my island table, in my kitchen, talking to all of you on my computer screen, and I'm not, in the wildfires that I'm looking at in the news. I'm not in, whatever photo in whatever story. My central nervous system actually isn't there and doesn't have to be there. I, right here, right now, I'm okay. I'm safe. I'm comfortable. I've got my cat. I've got my partner. I've got all of you to talk to. And so the meditation, people say it's a practice. Like, what does that mean? Well, literally, you're just practicing being where you are. And so that's been really helpful for getting at a little bit of that question that you asked.
Yeah.
Another piece that I would offer is, and this also ties back to the meditation, actually. But it's knowing your why. Like, what is your intention? What is your purpose? Or not like your purpose, but I mean, maybe, but what is driving you? Why are you doing what you're doing?
Yeah.
And honestly, like, even having that written down can be helpful. And
I think it's very easy to lose sight of that.
Yeah. It totally is. And if it's your compass, it's your map, it's your, it's easy when things are easy, but it matters when things are tough, and things always get tough. Yeah. You always get tired, you always get bored, you always get busy. And so in those times, remembering why, I actually want to be here. I actually want to do this.
Yeah.
It's aligned with a vision that I have, even for myself, for my life, for my identity, for where I'm trying to get to in this piece of my life.
Yeah.
And that's what can help keep you going. And that can also clarify. This is the third thing I'll say on this, I guess, is maybe I'll just dial back a little bit for a second. I haven't always been so good at thinking this way, but I was sort of forced to a couple of years ago, early in the pandemic. I'd gone through law school, I'd gone through articling, I'd worked a lot, really intensely. I was like I worked over 100 hours in my first 7 days as an articling student, and then it was a 10-month placement. It was very intense, and by the end of it, I was ruined. Like, nobody can really sustain that without a cost somewhere in their life. And for me, that cost was showing up in my body and in my mind and in my nervous system and my sleep and everything else. So it's kind of a wreck. And so one of the ways that I came out of that period of intense burnout was writing, in a journal, on a regular basis, daily, usually, and sort of starting to articulate this vision of what am I trying to do? What do I want my life to look like? What do I want my home life to look like, my relationship to look like, my work life to look like? How do I want to be spending my days? What kind of conversations do I want to be having, and with who? And what types of experiences do I want to be having, and so on. And when you start to articulate that, I found all of a sudden it was like I had this filter for what I would say yes to and what I would say no to, and what I would try to bring more of into my life and what I would try to, create less of in my life. It's suddenly just everything sort of falls into place. And so to your point about like feeling busy and overwhelmed, which I definitely still feel a lot of the time, but it's gotten easier to sort of have more things in my life that sort of line up with an explicit why, and fewer things that don't. And so I'm starting to find that I'm not getting stretched as thin, even if I'm working, working a lot.
No, that's so helpful. Thank you for, breaking that down into those three things. I think that's been, yeah, definitely very helpful.
My pleasure. I'm glad it was coherent.
Yeah, no, it was. I really appreciated how you broke it down. I definitely, yeah, I try meditating. That is something that you're right. It's a practice. And I think, yeah, it definitely is helpful, but, yeah, one thing that I definitely like want to work on more. But Ashish, I know you have your hand up, so feel free to.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have a question. Like, you know what, when you started saying about the motivation to work for in sustainability, so I can share my story and I have a question at the end. I mean, even I have a habit of rambling a lot, so I'm sorry for that. Okay.
You're in good company.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I have a background in chemistry and I have worked for various chemical manufacturers and distributors across Middle East and East Africa. And it took me 12,000 kilometers journey to realize my passion into sustainability from Dubai to here in Winnipeg. So, I'm sort of, I have a bias towards social and environmental development. So when you approach any consulting project for any businesses, how do you filter out your biases? Like you want to give a proper consulting advice to a firm that is not, biased advice, right? So how do you filter out your biases?
Wow, that's a great question.
That is such a good question.
I think I'm tempted to bring it back to meditation. We all have biases. We're always going to carry them. And so part of the answer, I think, is to be in this constant conversation with yourself, to sort of be interrogating and peeling back the layers and saying, where am I? What am I bringing to this? Where am I coming from? What are my assumptions? How am I showing up? And why am I showing up the way that I am with my work? Now that's not a very technical answer, and so I should also say that I haven't done a lot of technical consulting work. I've done some sort of academic and researchy and high level sustainability consulting work, but I haven't been in the weeds quite the way that you're describing. So I'm going to put on my coach hat for a second if I can, and I'm going to ask you. I mean, what do you think? What do you think is the best way to identify and address the biases that you bring to the table in sustainability work?
So, I can highlight one project which I did last time, and like in my academic project. So I wanted to address the issue of bilge water spillage. So in there, I've realized, this is a big issue and it's unnoticed. Like the shipping companies, they don't get, they don't pay for what they do, right? And then, I realized that, if we approach it by a triple bottom line, triple bottom line method where, there's some profitability involved, some incentives involved for the businesses. Also, you advise in a way that, there's less of environmental damages and stuff like that. Maybe then, you can come in a middle way, sort of.
I mean, that makes sense to me. I think, we're sort of in an interesting business here, right? Because if you're a consultant, if you're providing these types of services, you're in a client service business, but we're also all trying to push the envelope. And sometimes, if you're in client services, sometimes you're working with clients who are really, really knowledgeable, really, really literate about sustainability, or I'll say my legal practice as well. Sometimes I work with clients who are they really understand contract law, say, even though they're not lawyers. If they've just been through it, they get it. Other times there's this education piece, and with sustainability work, even this advocacy piece, because we're kind of mission driven, right?
Yeah.
And I think, again, there's just an interesting tension there. So for so many of these things, I think really the first step, and in some ways the most powerful thing, is just to acknowledge where there is a tension and just to try to, sit with it, right? Just be comfortable in that discomfort and be engaged on it. Never be, not that you have to be like tormented and unsatisfied, but be sort of satisfied constantly in the tension, in the contradiction of, I'm bringing biases to my work and I'm trying to also work through them, or I'm trying to be responsive to what the client wants, but I'm also trying to move the envelope on sustainability. And it's, we're probably never going to get it perfect, right? Like,
yeah. I would say, Aladdin, I do agree with that. And Ashish, thank you so much for sharing that. That was really insightful. And as you were speaking, Aladdin, I did think about, like as a consultant looking, like, what do I do day to day? How do I try to advocate for things that I think are important? If it's like, as long as it meets this like certain relevancy criteria, on the project ask, right? Like if it's not relevant to that project, or like to that, maybe even in industry, it can be really hard to like, say if you're really passionate about the circular economy, but this one energy company just doesn't give a crud about that. They're like, no, we don't care about that yet. We're just trying to figure out this. And it's like, okay, well, yes, obviously, if it's not relevant. I think like depending on what the client asks, and also industry too, I think also plays a huge role, because some industries are ahead of others, right? So right now we're seeing this huge shift of like who's doing really well in the space, and then who still has like a lot to figure out, and not because they're not trying to. And I mean, I'm sure some aren't really maybe that well, but really like who's pushing the envelope, who's pushing the needle. And then also they build out their own frameworks of like, okay, these are the things that they highlight as most important to them. And even like building off of those like UN SDGs and things like that can actually be really more specific to clients and where they have their largest impacts, whether that's land, ocean, forests, like what are they doing that is impactful, and then trying to like look at these solutions from a really holistic standpoint of like, okay, well, if they're making if they're cutting down X amount of trees, what's current in their space right now that's relevant to them? And like, where we do a lot of industry, like in peer benchmarking. And I think that's also a good way to start, because like, depending on if your client, like no client wants to be a laggard in the space. Everyone wants to be like riding this like middle of the pack. Like also people are really scared to be leaders, and there are leaders, but they really do show, because there's only usually like one or two of them. Let's be real.
Right.
Yeah. So I think like looking at peer standards is also really important, because then I know this is like might be veering off the question a bit, but essentially like hone your biases on this like holistic standpoint of like, if it's relevant, what is the industry doing? Where are they pushing? And then how can you, like Aladdin said, like push it forward in that sense? And like, where have they already gained momentum, and how can you keep going from there? Because I think ultimately, if they see that their peers are already doing that and they don't want to be behind, they're like, okay, yeah, we're going to start doing that too. So finding those areas where it's most relevant to them, and but also really impactful from this like, societal, economic, and also environmental view, I think is, really ultimately like how you will drive change, like as a consultant, because although like you're only, you can only do so much, like at the end of the day. And I always have to remind myself, like, you cannot tell every single person at this company what to do. Like they will only take it so far. They might not listen to you at all.
That's I think that was a much better answer than I provided, to be honest.
No, stop. All answers are valid.
I think that's spot on. And I would, I suspect perhaps you're familiar with frameworks like the SASB standards, or the GRI, or others that have different approaches to materiality, to Mary Kate's sort of point here. I think like what is relevant to the company, to the industry, and to its peers. And usually we don't have to reinvent the wheel on those questions. Usually the answers are, also being, it's in flux. Like everybody's trying to answer these questions in real time, and it's all imperfect. SASB has a lot that is helpful about it if you're focused on what's financially material to the company and its investors. But that obviously excludes this whole universe of significant impacts on communities and ecosystems and other systems of which we're a part. Standards and frameworks like the GRI can be more helpful in getting at those pieces. But I think that's a good starting point, at least, because then you're able to draw on a body of research and frameworks and analysis to sort of hang your hat a little bit. And yeah, to your point as well, I think pure benchmarking is great. Yeah. So, but I suspect that that's some of that is familiar, at least.
Yeah. That's awesome. What a great conversation. I was curious about when you were working at Greenpeace. Were you articling at Greenpeace, or were you articling separate from?
Yeah. So Greenpeace was like it was a few years ago now. I started working there in 2004, I think.
Yeah. Wow.
And I started as a street canvasser, and so I did direct dialogue fundraising for about 3 years. And then I moved into a communications role, and then I did a number of contracts in sort of research and advocacy work. And I was doing some fun, activist stuff as well. And I think I wrapped up my last contract there in 2009, working on some climate and energy projects. And then I went back to school, but I hadn't finished my undergrad even at that point.
Right. Okay.
So I went back to finish because I had sort of dropped out and, changed my degree and changed campuses. And so I thought, I'm sort of hitting an employment ceiling. I need to, I felt like anyway. And it was, financial crisis days. It was, the funding was tough for nonprofits then. And so I thought I'd better go back to school so that I can keep learning, growing, and have more impact and, understand my place in all of this a little bit better. And so I did that. I did a political science degree. Then I went to grad school and did a master's. I also focused on climate, environment, and international security stuff a little bit as well. And coming out of that, then I found this is sort of 2014 now, was looking for work, couldn't find the work that I wanted, applying for private sector jobs, couldn't translate my nonprofit and academic experience into something like an ESG analyst role, is this kind of thing that I was applying to, and risk analyst roles. And I think in retrospect, like knowing what I do now, law school made me a lot better at searching for jobs as well. So I feel like I probably could have done more back then. But I also did a lot. I applied to a lot of jobs. I did a bunch of interviews. I was sort of second choice, for a few things, which got pretty discouraging pretty quickly. And so that's what led me to apply to law school. Yeah. Was feeling like I'm at a place in my life that I'm not happy with. I actually I moved back home for a while. It was like sleeping on my parents' couch. I was 30 at the time. I think I turned 30 when I had moved back home, and that was in some ways great. Like I got to live with my family and with my grandma and my brother, and but it was also really challenging, and it was like incongruous with the identity and the path and the vision that I had for myself, and that's painful.
Yeah. Totally.
So I applied to law school.
How would you say that, like, that time that you were at Greenpeace and then throughout that shift of like trying to apply, feeling like kicked down, there wasn't much space for you in the space technically. How have you seen that shift over time, and like say now where we are here? Although, I mean, a lot of people still say like ESG is still in its infancy, which I don't know. I could argue, you could argue against that, because I mean, people have been arguing for ESG for a very long time. I think it's now just that companies and everybody's actually getting their heads around it, and people are actually like embracing it and building it out within their organizations. So just wanted to kind of understand, like, to you, how have you seen this landscape change? And also from a we're not work-life balance point of view, but like as a sustainability professional, how have you also seen that like play into that role as well?
So how has the space changed? I think I don't know. It's hard. Like on the one hand, I want to be like, well, it's hard to generalize from my own experience, right? Like, Greenpeace was amazing. It was a really small, tight knit community. That was my experience of it, and I had some amazing mentors there. But I didn't have a mentorship mindset back then, so I wasn't going to people and having conversations around how should I be approaching my career? How should I be figuring out what I want to do and what that looks like? What steps should I be taking? I was just in it. Yeah. And so, I had some great people that sort of rubbed off on me in some ways, but I wasn't approaching things with intention, particularly. But I also feel like the resources weren't there to the same degree. Yeah. I couldn't look out in the corporate world, for example, and see jobs that I might be interested in doing. It was, and it's partly my mindset then too, but I was very much like, I'm working for an NGO. I'm never going to go work for a corporation, and I'll never be a corporate lawyer.
Oh, how the turns have tabled.
I honestly would have just like laughed, and, it's very funny how life defies your expectations. And that's actually kind of a wonderful thing now, right? Like, how boring would life be if it never had any surprises? And if you 100%. Were always right? So, but I think one of the things that's changed is, for sure, there's now this broader sort of industry, particularly in finance and also in, corporate sustainability. So ESG, I see, a lot of it is really in the finance world. I think, like, I'm, pretty active on LinkedIn these days, and there's a lot of like intense arguments in the sort of ESG community around whether ESG is even a thing. Like, is that even a meaningful term? Like, can we even agree on what it means? Like, it's such a big umbrella. There's so much happening sort of under that term, but finance, it's a lot of it's in finance, right? It's about capital markets, it's about lending, it's about investing, and it's about putting prices on risks and opportunities associated with those activities. And maybe we're also concerned, maybe we also think of ESG as involving impacts and measuring impacts and so on. But so I'm getting off on a tangent here. To your point, what's changed? There are mentors, right? Like, there are people who have over the last 10 or 15 years, whatever, 15, almost 20 years that I've been in my career, if you can call it that, a whole bunch of people have had their own careers and found themselves wherever they are in government, academia, NGOs, private sector. And now they've cleared paths that other people could walk down, that we could walk down, that you could walk down. They've created positions. They've found themselves in positions of some degree of power, influence, resourcefulness, and so on. They could mentor you. They could show you what's what. There's all of these programs, certifications, credentials, training, and people are talking about this stuff. Like it's not. I wrote on LinkedIn the other day, I think, like, it's no longer like a weird flex to talk about sustainability at work, to bring that to your job, to talk about it on LinkedIn. Not everywhere, of course, but in a lot of places, we're just sort of expecting this to be part of our professional lives. And that's amazing. That's actually, I think, incredibly, incredibly powerful, that we're, again, not everywhere, but there are a lot more spaces now where your job is to ask uncomfortable and wrestle with uncomfortable, difficult, inconvenient questions. Yeah. And there's still a lot of distance. We're not where we need to be. But that is a fundamental culture change, it seems to me. So I think that's very different. Oh, yeah. And you asked me as well about like the wellness piece. How has that changed?
It's tough. I know. There's like, I know there's no like real right answer, but
I mean, I know how it's changed for me personally.
Yeah. Speak on that.
I was, I understand now, and I think now of wellness work as sustainability work, as wellness work as being circular work, that regenerative work, is not just about regenerating ecosystems and landscapes. It's about regenerating ourselves, our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with one another, our relationship with the communities that we're part of.
Yeah.
And that you can't, the way I see it now, you can't separate these things. Yeah. That really leaning into that has changed, is a big change that has happened for me. I no longer approach this work as something that should be miserable or something that should be heavy. I try to approach it as something that's joyous and exciting and powerful and important, and imbued with a sense of duty and purpose and so on. But I have come to learn that I am not serving anybody if I'm not taking care of myself. And that one of the best ways also that I can foster sustainability or circularity or regenerative principles in the world is by supporting other people on their wellness journey as well. And that we will all do better work. That it's all part of the same project. We don't just have an economic problem, right? It's not just that we need to sort of tweak a few levers and, tinker with a few business models. We don't just need to just have a couple new policies and then everything's going to be fine, right? Like we also, we have a profound cultural problem.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right. And, people have been saying this for decades. It's also a reason why decolonial work is so important. Yeah. I was on a call a while back, and there was a very eloquent elder from BC, and I don't remember his name or the community he hailed from, unfortunately, but the words that really have stayed with me were his observation that, for about 10,000 years, say, plus or minus to accord for oral histories and so on, people sort of figured it out. It took some time, but people figured out how to live okay here. And in just a few hundred years of colonial life, we've taken the planet to the point of existential crisis.
Yeah.
And there's an energy component to that. Of course, people started digging up lots of coal and making steam and cutting down forests and
the industrial revolution.
All of that. Like, there's this energy piece, there's this thermodynamics piece, there's a lot of different sort of systemic pieces going on, but this cultural piece is just intrinsic. And so this has changed for me as well. It's really coming to see this, I guess, like in a feeling way, like it's because I always, I would have had conversations like this, I think 10 or 15 years ago as well, but I just feel it very differently now.
No, I think you put that really eloquently, and that everything is so tied together. And that can be said for whether, your work and, then the society you live in and, socioeconomic status and things like that. Like, everything is just so interconnected. And you bring up such a good point about decolonization and the work that I think we have to do in order to reach a low carbon and just transition. Like, there is so much work like on that end too, that I think really needs to be put into this. And obviously not one person can do it alone. And it can feel really like, I don't know, like, especially too, like with capitalism, and we're all, we're all in it. And because it's like, you can't it almost traps you. It does trap you. It traps you because it's like, you aren't, say you're for, maybe you're not for it, but maybe you also are just like, I can't not live in this same society that I've been living in for my entire life without it, which is like the most crippling thing that you could probably think of. And it's like, you're like, when will it end though? But when will it end?
Yeah.
I don't know if it will, but I mean, I'm hopeful that maybe there will be some work being put into, the work that especially with, Indigenous Peoples Day yesterday, and, trying to work with our elders, trying to actually make meaningful connections and relationships. And that can be said for like, governments, organizations, private, public, like everyone. So yeah, I mean, it definitely is a lot, I guess, easier said than done, but knowing that like, you're not alone in this space, and you're not alone when you think about these things.
Right.
And I think that there's some like joy in that there is going to be change, and that there is going to be thoughtful change, and that, I mean, we're seeing it a bit more now, and maybe it'll look better. I don't know, but yeah.
I think there's enormous power in that. I mean, I have a lot of phone calls and Zoom calls with people every week, usually more than I can reasonably, more than I should be. But I'm just, having conversations with folks like yourself, folks who are, working in sustainability or climate or circularity in some capacity, or want to be. So many people who want to be, and like me, have sort of found themselves frustrated and unable to break through. So this is one of the things quickly that strangely hasn't changed. It's like, there are all of these jobs that have been created, and there's all of this demand for people.
Yeah.
And there's this huge pool of incredibly talented, passionate, really smart people who can't seem to break through and get the job. So that's a big, problem that we have to solve. One of the things that I hope to solve a little bit with my coaching. But talking to people, and all over the world, there's people like us who are wanting to show up in a different way and build a different world, and are just not having any of the nonsense anymore. And you're right, like we're still trapped in these in the system, right? And I think one of the things that can be very hard, that I've struggled with over the years, is we have like a forced complicity in things that aren't okay. There's no way to live perfectly. And maybe that's part of the trap, is thinking that there is. Maybe that's part of the thing we have to sort of wrestle with here as well. But also, I have to make money if I want to live. That's, a lot. That's a lot. And I can't just, we make choices out of a range of choices that are sort of structured by a system. And that range of choices isn't great. It's hard to buy, you go to any store, you go to any grocery store, you can try to be the most sort of perfect sustainable consumer you want, and somewhere in your footprint in the supply chain there's something, and that can be really uncomfortable. But I think that's why like purity and purity politics in organizing and activism work as well is just a total trap. Like, we have to make good faith efforts, we have to try, we have to be uncomfortable, we have to sacrifice, especially those of us with privilege, but perfection is unachievable. And again, it's just like an irreconcilable tension that we have to sit with.
Oh, that was very well put, and very insightful too. And it's like, it just reaffirms things that, maybe people in this space, people in this space are definitely thinking that these, irreconcilable holds. And so it's nice to see that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. Like, there are going to be transformational changes occurring, and there are people in the space who are thinking the same thing. And I think it's just about yeah, having a good community and really just leaning into that community. And yeah, so
I think it's so powerful. You could do anything when it's hard to do anything when you think you're alone.
Yeah.
And you can kind of do almost anything when you know that you're not, and when you know that you're in it together. And, you know, we're in it together. You know, we're not all in the same boat necessarily, but we're definitely all in the same storm.
Yeah.
And there is a real community of people. And I'm seeing it every day, every week, having awesome conversations with people from around the world. And there's this sense of, I have this sense that we're leaning into this together. And, you know, we're just really trying. We're just actually really trying. And this is also, you know, to your point about, I think that community is intergenerational, and our sense of our place in that can be really intergenerational, not just in the sense of, you know, we have solidarity, hopefully with, you know, with our parents or our grandparents, if they're starting to show up, and certainly with, you know, those who are coming after us, you know, me being at this point in my career, trying to support and help other people and so on, but really recognizing that we're in an intergenerational relay race. We're not going to solve this all in our time, and our work will remain forever unfinished. And part of our job is to, I think, do everything we can to support those who are coming after us, to give them as much latitude and room and options to continue to you know, have space, have runway as possible to keep working on this themselves. Not that we're, you know, it's like the old, you know, every graduation speech ever, it's like, you know, some person up there on stage saying, yeah, you kids are going to fix everything. It's so awesome and inspiring. It's like, you know, how about you just give us money and power?
Yeah.
And then we can do the things that we know need to happen. Right. So I'm not saying that, but I am trying to point to and highlight, I think, something that you said about, you know, this feeling of community, how joyful and powerful and awesome and exciting that can be. And just extending and amplifying that, in that, you know, tie this back to this nature, this notion of culture change. Like, okay, what does it mean to change our culture? I think partly it means redefining what our identity is, what our purpose is, what our mission is, what it means to live a good life. And I think one of the ways that we can redefine that is by saying, you know, part of my identity, part of my purpose, part of my mission is to be a good ancestor.
Yeah.
And is to be part of this intergenerational journey, and to be part of a generation that that didn't look away. Yeah. Even though we're in this really weird place, you know.
And that goes back to like your why as well, right? So that really does play a role in like your own why. Do I want to look away? No. So yeah, no, I think that's so insightful, and you really did put that really well. Like, I'm very glad this meeting is recorded, because I'm just getting so many wonderful takeaways. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. I know we're like almost at time, and I'm realizing at least one.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I usually ask questions around this time.
Perfect. That's where I was going.
To see if there are questions, or if people want to jump on, you know, feel free to like turn on your mic or your camera, or raise your hand, write a question in the chat.
I think, I don't know if it's Mikhail or Michael had a comment in the chat.
Oh, did I miss
just
it?
Moved here, trying to get involved in the space. I'd love to know how to break out into the space and create value with the experience I have running a sustainable lifestyle brand back in my country. It great. I mean, you know, we can have a whole other conversation about that. Please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, because I don't know if I'm going to do that just in a few minutes, but I suspect that you already have great ideas. I mean, if you've got this, you know, lifestyle brand experience, you know, I'd be curious to know what it means to you to break into the space here. Like, if you have a sense of what it is that you want, ideally. But not to put you on the spot, you can answer me now, but I'll feel also zero pressure to answer me now. And feel free to shoot me a message on LinkedIn, because we can pick that up too.
Hi, Aladdin.
Hi.
Thank you. Sorry, my video's not on. I'm in
no worries.
Stuff, but No, so basically, I do have experience running a brand and stuff. And what I'm trying to do is actually find a role for myself out here that adds value for people. And as somebody who's just moved here, I'm actually a bit taken aback by the amount of plastic that I experience in my daily life. And I've just been adjusting to this new anxiety that you kind of mentioned, about being a sustainable person or trying to be a sustainable person and having these issues with your daily life where you just are not able to find better solutions and you want to be part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem. But I personally have been having quite a challenge breaking into the space professionally, so I was hoping to maybe get some advice on that. I'll definitely connect with you on LinkedIn post this, but I was just hoping for some insight or if you had any ideas since you seem to have gone through the journey as well.
For sure. Thank you so much for sharing that and for your question. I think I'll just add one other thought on this piece of like carrying the weight of the systems that we're sort of stuck in and wanting to be part of the solution, not part of the problem, as you put it, right? Like another piece of this, that another way I try to get myself, because I feel like it's a trap. And so I try to get myself out of that trap. It's like a mind, because you can't win that game, right? That's the thing. You can't. There's no perfection, right? Like I could go. We used to joke when I was at Greenpeace, like about wanting to go live in the woods, or we could. What if we could just buy like land somewhere and we could all have a little village, with all of our friends, and that we just care about each other and we all understand this stuff. But we would be taking ourselves out. Like it's right. Like that's I feel that's an indulgent vision because I'm taking myself out of this and out of the ability to have an impact. So even that isn't actually it. And there's not enough woods in the world for everybody to run off to. So right. We have to work where we are and with what we have. And that means being uncomfortable. But one of the ways that I try to get myself out of this trap and let myself off the hook is by remembering that I didn't design this system. It's not my fault. Right. It's not your fault. Right? Like we have had these choices thrust upon us. And so we need to change the system. Should we support circular retailers? Absolutely. Of course, like, should we try to, shop with our dollars and, all of that stuff? Of course. Right. Like work at every level of change that you can, but it's the system change that's really going to drive this. And also allowing, I don't know, for me, I'm like, I allow myself to be angry. I allow myself to be angry at, oil companies that have funded decades of disinformation and engaged in decades of predatory delay that have left us in this corner with our backs up against the wall.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so there's like there's another trap, right? Because it can go the other way, and you can start to say, well, it doesn't matter, none of this matters. I'm just gonna, who cares if I whatever, pick your environmental vice, right? Who cares if I don't recycle? Who cares if I, eat tons and tons of meat? Who cares if I drive whatever car I want to drive? Who cares if I do this? And you can just become nihilistic because you think, I'm just an individual. It's not my fault. So I'm not going to care about it. I don't think that's helpful either. And, our individual choices do matter. We do know that, but we can't try to hang everything on that. So anyway, that's my gloss on that point. My gloss on, how to break into the space. I think what I found helpful is it's hard to get where you want to go if you don't know where that is. And you're very, I say this to myself all the time, right? It's like you're very unlikely to arrive to get what you want if you can't describe it. Very few things happen in life without intention. You can even think of this thermodynamically. Everything requires energy. to change from one set of conditions to another requires an input. And so for us, that input it's our intention and our effort. And the intention and effort have to be directed toward a vision. Otherwise, we're sort of just, ambling around and hoping to sort of to find ourselves to sort of, fall into something that we want. It doesn't mean that you have to have everything figured out, perfectly, right? This is necessarily an iterative process. It's always going to change, but start there. Start with the end in mind. Start with as clear as possible of a vision of, if everything went right, a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, what would that look like? I think we tend to, I'm not the, first one to say this, but I think it's apt. I think we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in a year and underestimate what we can accomplish in 5 years. And so with that as well, just start with the end in mind. Where do you want to, what does it mean to you to break into the industry? Are you looking for an ESG analyst role? Are you looking to work in corporate sustainability? Are you interested in sales? Are you interested in marketing? Are you a design person? Do you want to be doing more brand work? What is it for you that you want to get to? And then maybe, this is what, please do add me on LinkedIn because we can have more conversations about this.
Yeah, I'd love to. I think it's probably better for everyone else because we've run over time. But no, I would really appreciate the advice, and thank you so much for your insight. So far.
Oh, it's totally my pleasure. So let me just wrap up what I was going to say, which is that I maybe you have tons of answers to these to this already. So I don't want to presume that you don't, but so this is sort of for the benefit of anybody who's listening. Start with the end in mind, figure out where you want to get to, and then you can start to work backwards from there. And one of the ways to do that is just having lots of conversations like this. Find people who are doing what you want to do. Find people who are doing things that look interesting, and have conversations with them. And I have other suggestions as well, but I do want to be mindful of time. How are we doing, Mary-Kate? Can we take another question if anybody has one?
Yeah, of course. I know some people have had to head out, but if anybody does have any more questions, feel free to ask. Additionally, connect with us on LinkedIn, connect with Impact Zero on LinkedIn. We'd love to, continue the conversation, and we always have these Explore Series events monthly. So they do change from time to time in terms of the scope and what we subject matter. But
it won't always be Aladdin's meditation circle. In other words.
Yeah, exactly. Well, maybe we'll just wrap it up there then and give everyone, their night.
Perfect.
But thank you so much. This was wonderful. And I can't wait to post it on our YouTube channel so that everyone can enjoy it. But yeah, thank you so much again. And thank you to everyone else for coming out. This was really lovely. And I know it's a really nice sunny day here in Ontario, but don't know where everyone else is calling in from. So go enjoy the rest of your evenings. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much for having me, Mary-Kate. And thanks everybody for coming out. And please stay in touch. This was great.
Yeah, we should do another one of these in the near future.
That'd be great.
Awesome. Okay, well, take care, everybody, and have a good night.
Bye, everyone.